And we've heard some serious accusations there of electoral fraud from Nelson Chamisa. How legitimate do you think those claims are?
Well, I think the first thing that has to be said is there's an absolute deficit of trust in Zimbabwe. There was before these elections took place, and there's even more of one now. And part of the reason for that, obviously, is the history of ZANU-PF's rule in Zimbabwe, the way it's conducted elections on 3 previous occasions this century. And it was interesting, just before the election itself took place, an opinion poll was done on whether they thought the outcome would reflect their interest, whether it could actually, if they won, whether they would be honoured. 44% of people who were asked in the poll said they thought that even if they won, they would lose because the army would intervene. So there is a huge deficit of trust in Zimbabwe, and part of that, as I said, is because of the record of ZANU-PF. That said, there is no doubt that Mr. Chamisa has some basis for making these claims. The European Union monitors, for instance, the observers of the election, pointed out that it wasn't an even playing field at all, that there was heavy media bias, that was pressure put, particularly in the rural parts of Zimbabwe, a lot of pressure put on the electorate, and so on and so forth. The problem really at this stage, though, for Mr. Chamisa, is he hasn't presented us with the evidence. He can say, look, 60% of the electorate in Zimbabwe is under 30. Logically, these are people who want change in this country. They're most likely going to vote for me, just 40-odd years old. You know, common sense suggests that it would be that the outcome should have been much more even, particularly on the parliamentary vote, than it was. But he has yet to present the solid, hard evidence that will convince not just his supporters, but the people who voted against him in Zimbabwe and the international community.
Now, we've seen this week things have been very, very tense. Security deployed to the streets, and 6 people have died in clashes there. This afternoon, Emmerson Mnangagwa has been calling for calm, and he's also said that he'll govern both those who did and didn't vote for him. How do you see the situation evolving going forward?
Well, it's easy for him to say that now, but you know, he has first of all got to convince the opposition that this vote wasn't a big swindle like other previous elections have been. He has to somehow convince the ordinary people of Zimbabwe that the use of force against MDC supporters this week, and also the dispersal of that press conference that we heard reference to earlier on, were just aberrations, that they don't reflect the views of this government. He's going to have an awful lot of trouble to be able to do that, given his own past record as the security minister under Robert Mugabe, responsible for massacres of the Matabele during the 1980s, responsible for the violence that took place in 2008 after the second round of the election there. The problem for him is he lacks credibility with ordinary people. The second problem for him is he says he wants to use this election to convince the international community that in Zimbabwe from now on it's going to be business is open for the international community. He wants investors to come. He wants sanctions to be stopped. He wants Zimbabwe to be put back into the Commonwealth of former British colonies. But unless he can do something to clear up this mess now, convince people both inside and outside Zimbabwe that this was just an aberration, he's really going to have his work cut out.
Thank you very much there, Rob Parsons, speaking to us about Zimbabwe.